Hey, thanks for joining us. This is Tony Martin. This is our Thursday Q&A where we answer questions that you might have regarding resume writing, interviewing, and throughout the course of this discussion, if you do have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments below, and I'll do my best to try to answer those live. And also, I write a blog called howtogetthejob.blog, so go check that out. And if you are watching this on Facebook, be sure to come check us out on Instagram. It's also Hired How to Get the Job, where I try to give daily tips. This is more of a weekly forum. Instagram, I try to do daily stuff. And then on LinkedIn, I'm also going to more of a tip format as well as motivational discussions to try to help people throughout their job search. So first of all, let me just say this. Last week, at the end of my discussion, my daughter came by my office window there, and well, she wasn't wearing anything. And I made a comment, and the next hour, I got an email from my dad saying, you might want to reference that your daughter is 4 years old because it could just seem a little weird. So anyway, that was what happened last week in the middle of my moments there. But I did get distracted, but hey, that's just the joy of doing something at home, right? With your family at home. So anyway, so with that, I wanted to first give a tip out today, starting us off on when it came to resumes, because this came up recently, not just last week. It's come up weekly, actually. It really has to do with the summary on top of your resume. So the very first thing after your header, the reader should see your summary. Now, you want to make sure that when you're writing that thing, that it uses, first of all, impressive language. Don't use words like I'm comfortable with, replace the word comfortable with exceptional. Like if you're talking about project management, comfortable with project management, all the elements there too. It doesn't really help me, make me feel like you actually good at something. So instead of saying I'm comfortable with it, say exceptional project management skills. Go somewhere in that regard. So that way, with the reader understands you're really good at this. And to that effect, your resume shouldn't just, well, your header, your summary shouldn't just get longer as you apply to more things. So today you might be applying to a job in project management. Therefore, that summary should be super focused on project management skills, managing budgets, leading people, delivering things on time, on budget, no gold plating, managing stakeholder expectations. All of those things are really what you should be focusing on if you're applying to a job in project management. Now, tomorrow you might be applying to a job in sales. Don't leave all the project management stuff in the summary and just keep on making it get longer and longer and longer. Focus on the sales experience. I was able to grow revenue or whatever the case may be, but make sure that as you're writing that spot, that it's really customized to the company that you're applying to. And and frankly, I'm a big believer in using the company name that you're applying to with that resume in that spot, because then me as a reader, if I'm the recruiter, I'm going to see that Tony Martin wrote this for me specifically. And it's going to make me feel compelled at least to read a little bit more. And I've heard stats, and I got to guess they're probably right, because I think when I was doing a lot of recruiting, I was probably in this category that the average recruiter probably looks at a resume for 8 to 10 seconds. And you want to make sure that you're going to help them focus that 8 to 10 seconds on valuable stuff, which is the very, very beginning. Continuing on with the resume thought here, just like that summary isn't going to get bigger or longer, I should say, just because you have more experience and you're applying to more things. Your resume itself shouldn't necessarily just keep on getting longer and be formatted the same exact way as you're applying to more things as well. And I guess what I want to say is, like, for example, when you're 23 years old, you don't have as many accomplishments. Maybe you have some great ones, but perhaps being part of a fraternity in a college is a pretty big deal for you. I hope to God when you're 55, that's not as big of an accomplishment for you. And I would suspect that it's probably time after a few years to remove that accomplishment and supplant it with something else. So and I've talked before, and actually we're going to have a question about resume length, and I've talked before about resume length, but bottom line is you want to make sure whoever is reading your resume is really focused on the things you want them to focus on, and more isn't more. if it's not valuable. So those are the first two tips I wanted to give today. As always, if you have a question, feel free to write it here. If you think it might be, even if it's not your question, but you think it might benefit somebody else, ask it, and I'll make sure that I answer it there as well. So the first question I got this week was, I was working, one of my clients, Jeff in Humble, had a question about job boards. So like a lot of us, he's newly looking, hasn't ever looked before, and frankly was wondering, where is the best place to find work? What are the most effective job boards to go to? Now, this is obviously very subjective, right? This is my opinion. And I'm going to first say that there's a lot of specific job boards out there that are going to help you. I'm only familiar with things like RigZone, okay? For specifics. That's an oil and gas specific. If you're looking for oil and gas jobs, then you should probably stick to those specific ones that are well-versed in those areas. There's obviously the big ones like ZipRecruiter and Glassdoor and LinkedIn and Career Builder. Even the unemployment website has free postings. Indeed, each one of those, or places are going to have pros and cons. And here's the thing. Here's kind of my thought process on this. So your routine should be something. If you're looking for a job, you should have a similar routine every day. For the most part, right? So if every day at 8 o'clock I am hitting the job boards, I should be hitting the same one so I can quickly recognize if something is new or something is old, if something is a brand new job posting, and then that way I can be quick to react. And if I'm doing this, it won't take me long to say, oh, that's a new one that just came on today. Plus, most of these job boards in the bottom right corner of the screen, they say age of requisition, so they're going to help you. And I just looked at myself right now. My wife has told me that I'm very expressive with my eyebrows when I talk on this thing. So whatever it is, I guess because I'm Italian and I want to use my hands a lot, but I can't because no one really sees that. So anyway, sorry, I digress. But on these job boards, they have on the bottom right-hand corner the age of the requisition. So you probably have an idea to figure out a way to see how old it is. And you can know really early on if these requisitions are new or if they're old. But then more so after that, you'll just get used to it. You're going to be on these job boards a lot. So one thing I would say is look for duplicates. And what I mean by that is, so when I was a staffing and recruiting manager, we have an applicant tracking system, right? And we had several. But every single one would filter into Indeed, even though we weren't paying. Now, if we wanted to post on Glassdoor, we had to pay a fee. If we wanted to post on RigZone, Career Builder, we had to pay a fee. LinkedIn, a huge fee. And I was surprised. So in the process for me was I'd post a job, just say on a Tuesday afternoon. And then usually by Tuesday night, then I would get to the career boards and I'd start posting it there or scrubbing it depending on how the website worked. And I never posted on Indeed. And this was it was an afternoon. I posted the job on our company website and I planned on posting it the next day on the job boards. Well, I already had applicants the very next day, and I'm like, where are they coming from? And it said Indeed, and I looked on Indeed, and there it was. And I never paid to post on Indeed, but it turned out that SAP had a deal with Indeed or something. So all the jobs were getting scrubbed by Indeed, and they're automatically ending up there. My point to say all of this is, as you are finding jobs, make note of where you find them. There's no point in searching 17 job boards if 3 job boards have all the jobs. And if you notice when you go to the other 14 job boards, you see the exact same jobs that were already on Indeed. So I would say first start making that mental note of that, because you'll certainly be sure that at the end of the day, you're utilizing your time wisely and not just going everywhere because you want to look busy. Go to the places where the jobs are. Let me see. I got a comment here. LinkedIn profile contains same profile. That's a good question, Cameron. So Cameron asked a question about your LinkedIn profile. Should it have the same information as your resume? Truthfully, no. It should complement your resume. Now, I know Cameron is a CEO of a large credit union and he is not looking. But it's a really good point. Your LinkedIn, everything is your marketing, right? It's all the way that an employer can find you. So you want to make sure that everything complements each other, but doesn't have to say the same thing. A LinkedIn profile can be a little less formal. You could probably describe the company a little bit more. The beauty about LinkedIn is if you do it correctly and you put the company in there correctly, it'll actually create an automatic link to the company's website. which will really help you because there's a lot of companies out there that aren't as well known, perhaps. And you putting the company there doesn't really tell me as a reader what it is. So on LinkedIn, I'm now able to frankly figure out what kind of company you've been part of and see if you're going to fit into our organization. So that should help a little bit. So good question. Doesn't it be the same information? Certainly compliment. The other piece I'd say about that too is never have contradicting information, okay? If you were at a company from March of 05 to January of 07, and that's what it says in your resume, be sure as heck on your LinkedIn profile, it says March of 05 to January of 07. I think that's the same dates. But just make sure they match, okay? You don't want to have one thing contradicting the other because then that creates questions, that creates concerns, and the more questions you get, the less likely you're going to get a phone call. Because we as recruiters, we frankly don't want to call to ask questions that we don't know the answers to when it comes to unknown variables. We want to call and ask you what kind of specific equipment you've worked on. We want to make sure that Laurent knows how to use this thing over here, but we don't want to have too many questions to ask. We don't have that much time to skim through all these people, and there's already a resume in there with less questions than yours. So good question, Cameron. Aymeric from France. Laurent, you might like this one. From France, had 30 years of experience, and he wondered how long his resume should be. Now, honestly, I answer this question, I think, every 2 or 3 weeks, so feel free to tune out. But I realize that I get new viewers every 2 to 3 weeks, and I want to make sure that I don't just glaze over a question. And Aymeric and I had a really good conversation about this week. So 30 years of experience, your resume is not going to be 2 pages long. Unless you've been with the same company for 30 years, and a lot of Schlumberger guys are like that. But with Schlumberger, you're really bounced from place to place to place, so you're going to have lots of different experience in there. So I'm a big believer that your resume needs to be as long as it needs to be. And I know that's such a weird answer, but if you follow these rules, then you're going to be fine. Don't repeat bullets. If you did the same thing today that you did 7 years ago, you don't need to tell me you did it 7 years ago. Unless it's not very impressive. Then tell me you did it 7 years ago and don't tell me you're doing it today. But don't repeat bullets, even if you're doing the same thing. Focus on accomplishments, and hopefully you've accomplished something different in your new organization that you didn't before, even if the job is generally the same. I've been working on a lot of oil and gas guys' resumes these past couple of weeks, a lot of rig guys, okay? And if you're a mechanic on a 6th generation drill ship and a mechanic on a 6th generation semi-submersible and then a 5th generation drill ship, over 15 years, your job is very, very similar, okay? And that has been the differentiating factor for me, is to work with these individual clients to make sure that we focus on what are you really proud of from 15 to 20? What are you really proud of from 2010 to 2015? Even though your job requirement is the same, routine maintenance, keeping the vessel up, worrying about downtime, all that stuff's the same, but make sure that you're focusing on the accomplishments, not the job tasks. And my general rule for this is that you should have your bullets or points, they should be 75% accomplishment based. I would love it if you could frankly make all your bullets 100% accomplishments. If there was never a bullet on your resume that wasn't a mundane, generic detail, but sometimes we just need those not to fill out the resume, but to kind of explain what we do. I mean, you can't really say that, you've run a $1.6 billion project, and lift it alone with that. You kind of have to give some supplemental information that might not be as exciting. But the general rule is by doing that 3 to 1 or every 3 bullets of substance and accomplishments and 1 bullet of non, you'll draw the reader's eyes to the accomplishments. And that's what you want to do, okay? You don't want to draw the reader's eyes to a big, long resume and 50-50 shot he's going to read something that's actually good. Because again, the longer the resume is, the less you're going to be able to control what I'm looking at as a reader. You're going to hopefully hope that I'm drawing my attention to the areas that you want me to see. So with that too, I did a lot of functional resumes this week, and if you don't know, chronological is frankly just dates. You go in date time. Functional resumes is going to be more about what you actually accomplished, and that's was really relevant too for Aymeric as well, because Aymeric's resume was really focused, was a functional one, but so he had project management, he had sales experience, he had 3 or 4 different things, and I can't remember off the top of my head, but whatever job he's applying for, that's the function he should elevate to just below the summary. And then that way the other functions are less strong and they're going to be less focused on. But just make sure that's what I like about the functional resume. If you've been a 30-year professional, doing a functional resume might be better to highlight the key components you're trying to highlight as you're applying for a job. If you don't know what a functional is or what a chronological is, everyone I think that I've worked with knows I love to chat. I'm happy to take any conversations about that and help you out any way I can as we navigate this world together, even if it means at the end of the day you don't want to be a client. No problem at all. My goal is to make you a better candidate regardless of what's in it for me, truthfully, because at the end of the day, treat everyone the way you want to be treated and God will take care of you. All right. Now, Elisa out of Rio de Janeiro in Brazil asked, Katie, can you please go away, honey? There's my daughter. She's a princess right now. All right, Elisa from Rio de Janeiro. So today at least she had clothes on when she came into the room. That was the benefit there. He said, I don't have a U.S. green card, but I want to get back to work in the U.S. Is it going to be tough right now? Now, I get this question weekly right now with people all over the country who are trying to make sure that they can keep their not green cards, but keep their visa statuses and things like that, or get back home or back here. All I can say is look, I'm not an immigration attorney. Most companies, they're going to want you to work for them in some capacity before sponsoring you to come into the country, before they can, even legally. And I'm sure now there's a whole bunch more restrictions around that. So my advice to him and my advice to everybody who's kind of in this predicament is to frankly find a company that's a global company that has a presence where you are. And then hopefully you can work out of that branch. You can do that for a year, and then you'd be able to then get expatriated to the U.S. without having to worry about carrying an extra burden for the employer that you're working for. But that's probably the best advice I can give you there. I've done some stuff too with a lot of college graduates who are graduating right now who are on a certain visa. It'll allow them to work for the next 2 years, but they got to get employed before, we'll say, July, or they get deported. So certainly a good question. And if you're on that latter example, if you're a college graduate and you need help and you're already here and you want to stay here and you need help with your resume to get it noticed, that's really where someone like me can probably help you out a lot. Okay, Derek in Louisiana. My title in my company is not well known. How do I combat that on a resume? So in this case, what we were talking about this week was he has a job, and I'm just going to leave it at that. He has a job where the title in this one company, they use a very weird title, okay? And if I said what the title was, then people might know who Derek is, and I'll just leave it like that. But because it's a very unique title, and only one company I can think of actually uses this title, he's concerned that because he's been doing it for the last 5 years, a recruiter's going to look at it and not think that his job is relevant to the one he's applying for in this new company, because just by the title alone. So there's a few ways that him and I spoke about, but the way you can combat this. And again, as I get new guys coming on and coming off, feel free to ask me any live questions. I love to get live questions. But so here's a few thoughts. First of all, on your resume, you probably have the company you're working for, the dates next to it, and then after that, you're going to have what your title was, and then you start your bullets, right? A lot of times what I've been seeing and what I've been doing, and I like it, especially if the company's not very well known or if your job isn't well known, a quick 1 or 2 lines underneath your title describing your day-to-day, describing your job. It's not a bullet, it's not an accomplishment. But it can actually be a sentence or 2 sentences, whereas bullets are not sentences. But this could actually be a sentence where you can really just say, I have, this is what I'm doing, or this is what my company focuses on. And hopefully by being able to do that, you're then able to really pull out the mystery behind what you do. So certainly you can use that. And I kind of call that a summary below the role type of description. Also, hopefully this isn't your only job you've had, and hopefully other jobs below that you've done and they're similar in nature. So if you've done this for 20 years or 15 years, and just because the last 5 years aren't as clear on a role name, hopefully the other roles will help you or help the reader understand what your expertise is in. The professional summary on top of your resume, again, remember, you're going to customize, as we talked about at the top of this discussion, your professional resume on the top is going to be customized for the job that you're trying to apply to. So if that's the case, then you're really going to be able to not worry about that too much, because you can then say, you know, as a blah, 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 my daily tasks are, which is exceptionally suited for the role at XYZ company as a position. Very cryptid there, but hopefully you understood. If you don't, let me know. I can certainly tell you more. Mark in North Carolina, education on a resume. Should I lead with it or should I put it on the bottom? Now Mark is a Marine, and he had his education on the top before his Marine Corps experience. And I think part of that is because he's got so many things that he's trying to potentially do when he gets out. He didn't want to just come across with, I'm a one-trick pony, or this is what I am. So he wanted to try to, I guess, find something that was more general to relate to more people. So here's my general feeling, and most of the time I've heard about this. If you've just graduated college in the past year, 2 years or so, and it's your biggest accomplishment, kind of going back to how we talked about at the beginning of this, it's your biggest accomplishment, put it at the top of your resume, okay? But again, if you graduated college 5 years or more ago, put it at the bottom, because hopefully you have more experience, which is what's qualifying you for the role that you're applying to. Whatever is the qualifying factor that's making you more likely to be attractive to the recruiter for the role you're applying to, that's what you want to lead with. And often it's not, you know, a bachelor's degree or a master's degree. And actually, while I'm on the master's degree, if something is imminent, it's what, May 7th today? If you're going to get your degree, your master's degree in June, you can put, you know, expected date of graduation, June 2020, or proposed graduation date for master's. You can put that on your resume. But if your graduation date for your master's is in 2022, don't put it on your resume. Also, if you haven't graduated college and you started college, don't put it on your resume saying, you know, I did 2 years, but I had to leave because I had to pay the bills. Nobody cares. We only care about what you've accomplished. So by you saying I didn't finish college, you're almost saying I didn't accomplish something and you're highlighting it. Just get rid of it. But in the master's case, if your master's degree is 1 or 2 months away, you can certainly put it on there. It looks good. If your master's or bachelor's is 12 months, 18 months, 24 months out, leave it off your resume. It makes you look less attractive to somebody like me. Because what's going to happen is I'm going to see that Will Wallen's graduating, getting his master's degree in 2022, and I'm going to immediately think, if I hire Will Wallen, he's going to have to be splitting 50% of his time with me and 50% of his focus on getting his education. I don't want to hire him. I want to hire someone that's focused on on working for me and working for our company and helping us succeed. Now, if you're a month out from getting it, put it on there, because I realize as the hiring manager, it's not going to be a burden to me and it's a feather in your cap. So you kind of got to play that game there, but it's not crystal clear how to do it. But I hope that helps a little bit. And also, in that same respect too, realize that once you're hired by the company, or, you know, because you get this question too, like, well, if I'm getting my master's, should I mention it during my interview then? Because I don't want to mislead them with the time, you know, allotment that I'm going to be able to be available. Once you've built up a rapport with your interviewer and you're able to actually discuss things, and you think it's going to be enough of a time situation you need to bring it up, then bring it up. But if you don't think it's going to be a time consideration on your job, on your time, and it's going to affect your job, I wouldn't bring it up. I'm on a couple of different boards, and I'll tell you, during interviews, I've said, hey, look, I kind of have this commitment, and I didn't tell them on the first interview. I told them after they fell in love with me, don't ever do it like on the first interview. Do it once they love you. But I kind of have this thing. I do this. This is what it is. You know, and it makes you actually a more endearing candidate because you have responsibilities and you look like you have good leadership skills and things like that. But yeah. So hopefully that helps. There's an appropriate time to bring it up, and yeah, that's it. So Nick in Houston. Should I put references on my resume? Nick, no. Don't put references on your resume. At most, put references available upon request. but don't put a reference on your resume. You put a reference on your resume. I have been that recruiter before. Okay, so I am hiring, we'll just say I'm hiring a director level position. And I can't find any directors that I'm excited about. I've gone on LinkedIn, I've gone on Glassdoor, I've gone on Facebook, I've gone on social media platforms to try to find someone I'm looking to recruit. I have then gone to senior manager and managers' resumes in the same job discipline, not because I wanted to hire any of them, but I wanted to scroll all the way down and see if they listed any references. And as soon as they listed references, guess what? I'm throwing away Stacy's resume, and I'm now calling the reference on the bottom of her resume because that's really the position I wanted to talk to. And I'll never say that Stacy gave me that number because, well, I don't really want them to know that I don't know Stacy, or I don't want them calling Stacy and going, hey, Stacy, Tony Martin called me and said he got my number from you. How do you do that? Because that's going to make you look bad too. But I certainly will make sure that I use that and just say, hey, I came across your number while I was doing some research. I'm looking for this position, and I've hired a lot of people off of the references of the resume. So protect your friends, protect your professionals around you, protect their data. Don't put it on there. At most, put references available on request, but let's be honest. We all know references are available on request. And I'm a big believer that space on a resume is sacred. You shouldn't just use space on the resume and fill it up with stuff, especially stuff that's obvious. So in my personal opinion, I would just say remove that and ignore it. And then when you fill out the application, there's often a spot for references. Or when you actually get through the interview process, usually the last step is they'll call references if they do it at all. So, and at that point, you can probably call your references and say, hey, look, expect a call from Tony Martin. And you kind of are able to then, work them through there. And then Cheryl from Houston asked when I'm the last question that I have. So again, we'll have some time here at the end. If you got any questions you're thinking of, feel free to type them in. But the last question I got this week was, what question should I close an interview with? So it's for me, it's really obvious what question you close an interview with. You close the interview with the question, hey, thanks so much for your time. This was great. Where do we go from here? When can I expect some follow-up steps? That's how you close the interview. This gives you permission to then follow back up, because we all don't want to be that desperate person that calls every 2 weeks. And we also don't want to be that person that forgets about them or doesn't look interested. So it's that tap dance act between looking desperate, being excited, but not bothering and not pestering. So by asking them, hey, when do you think we'll have follow-up steps, or when do you think you guys will be able to make a decision? Oh, it's Thursday today. Hopefully by next Friday we should know more. Fantastic. Do you mind if I send you an email Friday afternoon next week just to get the latest, just in case something changed? No, not at all. That gives you your permission to then follow up. Now, you sure as heck better follow up the very next day with a thank you email or a thank you something, not a fruit basket, but at least a note of some sort. Thanks so much for taking time to talk to me yesterday. I really appreciate it. Certainly follow up with that, but don't don't miss the opportunity to have permission to follow up with them a week later. It's just like in sales. It's the same exact things you do for sales. Do you mind if I follow up with you in a couple of months? You do this stuff for sales. You need to do it when you're selling yourself and you're trying to get a job. But on a general answer, what kind of questions should you close an interview with? That's the last question you should ask. But those other questions that are just as important, they need to be specific about the job. They need to be specific as best you can about the person you're talking with. So you shouldn't have, if you're doing 3 interviews today and you're meeting with a manager, a director, and the VP, you should not ask all 3 of them the same questions. You should do your homework. You should know who you're talking to in advance. You should know how long they've been with the company. A real easy one is, hey, I see you just joined the company 6 months ago from blah, blah, blah. What was the biggest thing that you had to adjust to? I mean, that shows that you have some interest in the person you're talking to. It shows that you research them. So you can always ask something like that, but I would much rather you ask questions about the job and about the interview. Meaning, during the course of the interview, I hope they've told you some of the challenges you're going to expect in that job. If they haven't, that's a good question to ask. But if they have, and they've told you and you have a good understanding about the position, one of my questions would be, well, during the course of this conversation, it became clear that you're implementing a new SAP system, and fortunately, I did that at my last company, and there were some headaches. Are you guys experiencing this similar headache with the HRIS team, or whatever? Make it specific, but make it like a question that shows you understand what they're going through, and you're not just asking a question because you want to ask a question. You're asking a question because you might actually already be able to solve one of their problems during the course of the interview. And just the fact that you've asked that question has highlighted that you have more skills than you actually were able to display during the interview. So sometimes your questions can be used to highlight your strengths, which they should be if you do it correctly. And then that's going to lead you to being a more attractive candidate. So everything in the interview process is a screening mechanism. And that is the number one thing I tell to every candidate that I've ever hired, probably because I have too much compassion, because I want them to let them know that don't screw this up, because I want to hire you, and I don't want to have to restart this thing over in 2 weeks. So everything from the way you treat the receptionist to the way you treat the people at the drug screening clinic to the way you treat the person that calls you to conduct their background screening test. Frankly, when you're interviewing for a job, usually the first person you interview with is probably the lower level person. Next week, I'm going to talk about the interview process and kind of how it all works and what they focus on through different stages of the interview. And I just decided that right now, so I'm writing myself a note so I don't forget. So that'll be next week, why the interview process is structured the way it is and really what you're trying to present during the interview process. And it's not the same thing for the phone screener as it is for the VP. You don't need to tell the same stories. You need to have a progression there. But with that, the first person that calls you is probably the person who has the least amount of authority in the role. Okay, they are just trying to make sure that you fit the job description. But with that, very often, this person is going to be with you through the whole process, okay? So the person with the least amount of authority in the company, most likely, or with this role, is going to be the one that's scheduling all of your interviewing, is going to be the one scheduling all of your all of your meetings with the VPs and the directors. So when the decision gets made 4 weeks later to hire you or not hire you, I guarantee they are going to have an opinion about how you treated them and how easy you were to get a hold of, how easy you were to work with, how coachable you were if there was things you needed to work with. So I guarantee that every person in your process has an opinion and it's going to matter, but don't discount anybody, whether it's the receptionist or the first person doing the phone screen. All right, and then now I got one more question from Tom. Tom, when you identify a posted position that's interesting on LinkedIn, Glassdoor, etc., do you recommend figuring out who the recruiter is and reaching out to them directly, or can be viewed? I love that question, Tom. Now, Tom is a phenomenal staffing and recruiting guy just like me. So, Tom, I'd love your opinion on this, and I wish we could have a dialogue right now. Here's my opinion. My opinion personally is it can be done well and it can be done poorly. I've seen it done very well where, and I have an article about this on my blog, How to Get the Job.blog. It's how to use LinkedIn to your benefit once you apply to the job. Now, I personally think as long as you're not checking in with me every single day, I would love to get a note from you to differentiate you from the herd saying, hey, this is Tom. I just applied to your staffing and recruiting role. Requisition number. Always put the requisition number in there to make sure that it's easily trackable for me and I can find out where you are. But if you write a well-written, polite email or a well-written, polite message on LinkedIn or Glassdoor or wherever, as long as it's well-written, polite, and not aggressive, it's fantastic. I've had guys that have been super aggressive and they've called me, let's crush this thing, champ. And every other day I'm getting an email from them and I've just said, look, I can't hire you as a recruiter right now. I'm in the interview process with a couple other people. I'll let you know. But they turned me off so much because of I could just tell their personality was not going to be a personality I could work with. And I'm pretty aggressive, as most people will tell you. But bottom line, the energy level was a little bit different, and I just didn't like it. So, it can work to your advantage. It might be a blessing in disguise if your true personality shows through and you don't get picked, because again, you might not work out in that organization. I think as long as you do things tastefully, you do things with thought behind it, you're going to be just fine. And utilize LinkedIn, utilize your network when you apply anywhere. If you apply to any job, usually HR is going to be the one that's going to you're going to be able to connect with anybody in HR, and they're probably going to accept your connection, and then you can get their email template, and then you can probably then link in or email the hiring manager directly. And we already had discussions about that a couple of weeks ago, but really at that point, that's kind of a better tactic in my opinion, because then the hiring manager, if you do it well and you're asking for his expert opinion, then he's then going to the recruiter and saying, hey, take another look at Tom. He emailed me last week. He emailed me yesterday. He's got a really interesting background. Take a look at him. That often has more weight than just the recruiter, because truthfully too, recruiters are really busy. So with that, I can go on and on for that, but we're already 5 minutes past our time here. So thank you so much for joining today. And again, remember, we do this every Thursday. Please like this Facebook page, Hired How to Get the Job, so you'll get the updates. Follow us on Instagram, because on Instagram, I try to give out a daily tip, at least one. And then tomorrow, I always on Instagram try to answer all of these questions I got, including Tom's, including Cameron's, in 15 seconds or less, because I'm still learning how to use Instagram, frankly, and I'm struggling through it. So if you want to watch someone just bumble their way through something, follow me on Instagram, because it's just kind of funny. My wife is, I'll leave you with this. My wife is phenomenal at social media. She's posting this varsity level stuff on the food she's eating, and I'm trying to do a professional podcast thing here, and mine looks like a 2-year-old did it. So if you want to laugh at some incompetence, take a look at Instagram. Anyway, with that, hope you all have a great day. Take care. I'll talk to you next week.